The bootleg, if you please. Thank you kindly. As you can see, for today's bootleg breakdown program, we're going to be looking at the CT Toys 185 Spider-Man Classic Costume Version figure, which, as you can guess from the packaging, general naming, and everything else in the clamshell here, is a direct lift / knockoff of the MAFEX figure of the exact everything, minus a few small details here and there. Keyword on this small. Oh, and this random knockoff stand, just for why not, I suppose. Now, the thing you need to know about most CT Toys releases up to this point, because they've had quite a few, including a number of MAFEX figures, is that they are all undersized compared to the original toy. This one being actually more like 5 3/4 inches tall, is going to be slightly smaller than what the real figure has, which unfortunately, just for a quick heads up, means the parts will not be interchangeable. What it also means is that while you have the figure kind of standing here on its own, in an idle pose, and it looks just great, when you go to try to articulate the toy, get it to move around, you're going to notice a few odd quirks here and there. Now, in terms of the general articulation, you have all the exact same articulation points as what the original toy had, but because you have various things being casted in a slightly smaller size, like the upper torso in particular I find, you're going to have some things that don't move as far back and forth as they're supposed to, such as the butterfly joints being somewhat limited in range, at least from this initial testing. I can't get them to move back and forth as they're supposed to, and the shoulders themselves, while functional, are extremely tight around the shoulder, as well as the bicep swivel. I kind of left the sound in here, but they're a bit of a squeaky noise, meaning that needs some silicone oil to loosen them up. Also, with the upper torso being slightly smaller, that also means when you're trying to articulate kind of the waist swivel as well as the upper body joints there, it's going to result in some extra gapping that wouldn't be present in the original toy, and also means that the figure can't bend back and forth as much as it's supposed to. The hips crotch piece is a different bit of plastic, just worth mentioning on that one. Bit of a softer bit, so it works, but it's a bit weird. The legs themselves in the spread are actually beautiful. It's also some full 180% split on there, or percentage there. And frankly, the hips, aside being a bit squeaky, work as it's supposed to. Same with the knees, same with the ankle joints. Toy joints, or the toe joints I should say, are a bit rubbish though. And the paint on the toes in particular I find are rough. And in fact, I will actually also say that about most of the feet and hands included in here, it's the paintwork tends to suffer on the accessories the most, surprisingly enough. While on the main figure, I will say the black web lining isn't the greatest, but at least it's stable there. However, when you get the stuff like the hands on here, that's not darker plastic, that's just incredibly poor paintwork, folks. I'm sorry, there's no excusing on that one. It's like you have a whole black blotch on the back end of the hand, or the inner part there, and the web lining itself is inconsistently painted from one piece to the next. Now, you're paying about $30 here, at least that's what I paid in this case. So no, you're not going to expect the same kind of quality as a proper MAFEX here, but yeah, it's still a bit messy. The hands end up looking a lot darker than they're supposed to, same with the feet, with kind of big blotchy paint jobs. Plastic-wise, I have to give them the credit though. The plastic does feel fine, and these things are able to slip on and off of the wrist joint without any real hassle on that one. So they're entirely functional, they're just a bit ugly to look at. Even the magnet hands have their appropriate magnets and such, so they're effective, although the magnets are not necessarily inserted correctly, as you can see on the hands there, and even on the feet they're a bit off-kilter, much like the paint job. But it's fully functional, at least that much I can say about it. Now, as for the various web lines and web bits, nice, very flexible bits. I will say that because the sizing of, I believe, the wrist pegs are slightly different than what they are in the official, I feel they're a bit loose, and I have no idea what's going on with this particular web line bit. The casting is very messy. There's a lot of discoloration, and I think it's missing a magnet. So yeah, that bit I would not recommend using. Now, proof of concept here. Getting the heads to switch around, I didn't even need to really warm up this figure. I was able to just quickly click on and off the assorted heads without any real hassle. It's a nice satisfying pop when you get it back on there, and both of them articulate just fine, no issue. Same with the wrist pegs, although I will say the wrist pegs themselves are a bit finicky just because it's a slightly softer plastic, I feel. Everything fits on there. Once you get it on there, it stays on there for all the various hands. It's just a bit fidgety to get them on there. So yeah, it might take a little bit just kind of holding the peg straight in order to switch your hands, but you can still get it done without too much issue. Now, I wish I could say the same about the web lines for this particular toy. I named them the ones that are supposed to go on the wrist peg, I believe. They are a bit loose. So you could probably mess around with them more than I did for this particular pose for the video here to get them to really look right. But it is a bit of a hassle, I find. And admittedly, at least in my own case, I'm not really going to use these parts too much, so I'm not going to mess around with it too much. Maybe a little bit of extra paint. Now, the figure will be able to... Honestly, I didn't do too many extra poses on this part of the camera here. But if you can think of a Spider-Man pose, you're probably going to be able to pull it off there. With the caveat being that the upper body, if you push it too much, the upper torso might pop off of it. And will leave some gappage. But generally, does whatever a spider can. I can't complain too much about the range of the articulation of the toy. More just the paint. Breakdown part. Kind of trying to figure out exactly what's going on with the butterfly joint and the neck joint, which doesn't really have any movement up and back and forth, and that's because this upper torso part, pardon the pronunciation there, not only is it too light, there's like a solid block in there. If anyone who has the original sees in the comments, please tell me if that's the same in the original, because I am curious. It would seem counterproductive, but it would also explain why the butterfly joints don't work like they're supposed to. It's a bit of a too tight fit in this case. Generally speaking, though, the rest of the figure, when you manage to separate it, is about as expected in there. Although I will say that actually pulling certain parts out, especially like the knees, elbows, and such, are incredibly tight. So that's the reason you didn't see me pull them apart here. I didn't want to break the toy. It's, aside from a few caveats, it's very functional. And mostly it's stuff like the butterfly joints that I needed to fix most because I think they were just assembled incorrectly. Now as we let some B-roll move in the background there, I'll give you my opinions on this toy, namely that for the $30 or so that I paid for this, sure, it's not going to be good as a real MAFEX in both detail and movement, that was a given, but it's definitely not a bad toy. Honestly, I'm actually having a lot of fun messing around with this thing, and kind of, after I got it fixed up with a shock oil, as you see me doing here, the thing's very fun to play with, frankly speaking, and I don't have to worry about too much of it because I paid a bargain basement compared to what the original was before the re-release came in. Now, scaling is a bit of an issue. It is slightly undersized from the original, but it honestly pretty much scales well with other various lines, so that's hit or miss there. But what I will say is there's some room for modification on this thing, I feel. So, maybe we do just that. But that'll be for another video. Catch you later.